Good morning. This is Rich Sierra, president of the Florida Small Business Legal Center. We're here at episode number 27 of Business SOS, just on the eve of Thanksgiving. I'm very excited today. We have a special guest. We have my friend and bankruptcy attorney, Jeff Tromberg. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Rich. It's been a long time.
Yes, Jeff and I go back over 30 years before I became an attorney. When I told him that I was going to law school, he tried to talk me out of it. Clearly, I did not listen. I'm not sure if that was a good idea, but anyway, we're here.
No, the world is much better with you as an attorney. You do a great job.
Thank you. Feeling is mutual, my friend. You have been in prior practice for close to 30 years.
32 plus, yeah.
Wow, time flies when you're having fun. And you're the owner of Florida Debt Relief Center, LLC, correct?
Correct.
All right. And tell me a little bit more about your practice and what do you focus on?
So I help people solve problems. People come to me usually with either foreclosures or tax lien issues, garnishments, you name it. And we try to craft a solution that works for them. Usually they come to me after months and sometimes years of struggling with debt. And we try to basically stop everything and move forward, look past the debt and figure out how they can move on from it.
Our audience are business owners. What are the maybe one or two frequently asked questions that business owners may have if they're considering filing bankruptcy?
Well, let's take a step back. When somebody decides to go into business, they're already going into a very high-risk venture, and so many business owners don't succeed. We've all seen and read the statistics on how many businesses fail in 1 year, 5 years, and 10 years. So it's not unusual for me to represent a business owner in one of those instances when it fails. And we all like taking risks. Even lawyers who work for themselves are risk takers and entrepreneurs and business owners. So what I always tell business owners is, try to figure out what we can do in terms of pre-bankruptcy planning. God forbid you need to go down that route. Or if you see the business tailing off, what to do. So it's not that business owners come to me when things are going well, but sometimes they come to me too late in the process when things are going sideways and they're not sure, and they might dip into their 401k or they might take a second mortgage on their house. And those are the conversations that I love to have if I can before they make those mistakes.
So at what point should a business owner say, maybe I should make this phone call?
I would say without getting into the weeds in terms of the finances of the business, but I would say if the business owner is struggling making payroll, this business owner is struggling paying for themselves. Sometimes business owners pay everybody but themselves. So I would say if they're at that point, they're probably a little late in the game, and I would say I'd welcome that conversation before it gets too late.
And what are the types of bankruptcies that you help business owners with?
So I know your focus and your practice is primarily on business owners. I look at everybody as just people, husbands and wives, whether they own a business, whether they're a W-2 paycheck employee. So the typical bankruptcy that an individual or husband and wife, whether they own a business or not, but especially if they own a business, you're looking at two main types of bankruptcies that many people have heard of, Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. There's also what is called a Chapter 11, which is, I kind of consider that a very high-end reorganization for big businesses, but it can be used for small business as well. But very rarely do I do a bankruptcy for the business itself. It's usually for the owner of the business who has incurred debt, maybe personal guarantees, maybe just simple loans that they took out to prop up the business.
So how can a business owner protect himself or herself to avoid getting in that situation?
Well, my practice is not primarily about like estate planning and stuff like that. So I'm usually helping people deal with the situation at hand. But if a business owner thinks that they need some estate planning, they would probably go to an estate planning attorney and build trust. But they, have trust written for them and funded and so on. The best way is a homestead. I always tell people, if you're renting and you have an opportunity to own a home, those things are protected. And without getting into certain dates within the bankruptcy code, they're protected almost for 100% of the equity in your home. So that's the best thing that I would tell somebody to do. Another thing is to have an IRA or a SEP IRA, and that is a great tool for business owners to take money out of their account, have matching funds coming out of the business account, and those SEP IRAs are also protected from creditors. And when I say protected, what we're talking about is if I'm pressing enter and the bankruptcy case is filed, what assets are at risk when the bankruptcy case is filed? What assets are protected? And if they're protected, that means the trustee in a bankruptcy can't take it and liquidate it for the benefit of creditors, but it also means the creditors can't come and get it either.
Yeah, that's very important information to know. You mentioned pre-bankruptcy planning. What is that?
So it's generally frowned upon, but I always tell people if you have the luxury of time, and when I say frowned upon, trustees and the creditor industry don't want people to plan for a bankruptcy. And when I say plan, I'm not talking about taking your credit cards and running up the debt. What I'm talking about is structuring your finances so that if you are doing a bankruptcy, or if you know you're doing a bankruptcy, but we have the luxury of time, why not get yourself in a position so that you can have a better bankruptcy result and also recover faster? And so what pre-bankruptcy planning to me means is making sure, for example, that you have a homestead. So if you've been renting and you've been thinking about owning a home, now's a good time to be looking at that. If you have an old car and you think, oh, what's my credit going to be? Am I going to be able to get another car? Maybe now's a good time to go car shopping. And I'm not saying buy a car or lease a car that you can't afford, but I am saying maybe it's time to go get a car that will last you the next 7 to 10 years, where you don't have to worry about the impact of credit on your ability to have transportation.
Speaking of credit, a common question that I believe clients have is like, how is the bankruptcy going to affect my credit?
Depending upon my relationship with the person sitting across from me in my office, sometimes I laugh. Sometimes we joke about it because I tell them, I said, because everybody's got their credit on their phone. I said, why don't you take a look at your credit score right now, on Credit Karma or some of these other sites, and their scores in the high 500s, low 600s. And I say, who are we kidding? Your credit right now is not very good before you walked in this door. So I try to tell people, credit, you're not defined by your credit. There's life after bankruptcy. There's life after creditors collecting from you. And the best thing you can do to rebuild your credit is to get rid of your debt. And there's only 2 ways to get rid of your debt. Only 2 ways. It's real simple. You either pay it or you file bankruptcy to get rid of it. That's it. So you can't improve your credit without getting rid of the downward pressure on your credit score and your finances. So you've got to get rid of the debt so that you can then rebuild your credit and your score can go up.
What are the benefits of bankruptcy?
Oh, well, I think you get to sleep better. I know a lot of people lose sleep. Just business owners, generally speaking, lose sleep all the time. Yes. about the things they did, the things they didn't do, the things that are on that never-ending list of things to do that they never get around. So I say you'll sleep better, you get rid of debt. Somebody told me this line about QTL, quality time left. We only have so many more years on this planet, so many more years working the business, so many more years being able to save for retirement and get ready for retirement. So the sooner you stop what you're doing, which is not working, and the sooner you can get rid of the debt and rebuild, whether it's rebuild and start another business, whether it's go back into the workforce, whatever. Each person's got a different situation, a different skill set. So the benefit of bankruptcy, obviously, is getting rid of the debt, but it's also paving a path forward.
Some of my clients sometimes are in the litigation standpoint. I do a lot of business litigation, and sometimes it looks like things are not going to go well. It's either they're going to lose the case, things are not going well. At what point, from your experience, it's better for the client to say, I'm just going to file bankruptcy? Is it better for them to consider doing it before a judgment or doing it after a judgment has been entered?
Those are always incredibly tough conversations to have with clients from your standpoint, because the client is very optimistic. They believe they were right, and they're like, how could we possibly lose this case? And they get frustrated. You know, I look at, even if they win a case, what did they win? Okay, is if they're suing somebody and they're trying to collect, great, and maybe they'll get a judgment, and then they will have trouble collecting if they're being sued. So I guess the part of the question is, are they being sued, or are they suing somebody?
They're being sued. They're being sued, and they just don't have any more to continue the litigation.
Right. So, you know, there's a thing called sunk cost. Many people understand the concept. It's where you keep throwing more money and more money at the problem. But even if you win, what did you really win? So I always tell people, sometimes it's better to cut your losses. If you're being sued, not being sued anymore, but still having a struggling business, is not necessarily, how do I say it? It's not a win, in my opinion. And I'd rather see people cut their losses, get rid of debt, because the judgment is rarely the only thing they're dealing with. Okay, find me somebody who's being sued for a business debt or a credit card debt, and I could tell you they probably have 5 other creditors that aren't suing them yet. Could, may not, but that debt is still out there. And I'd rather see them take their medicine and move forward. The other question you asked about, which timing of a bankruptcy as it relates to a judgment. Okay, it's not a crisis to let things play out and let a judgment happen. But my preference for many, many years has always been to file bankruptcy before the judgment, because there's no real upside for all the reasons that I said about other debt, and you're throwing more money, good money after bad, whether it's attorney's fees and time and effort.
I think one also the benefits of bankruptcy in reference to litigation is the automatic stay, and also to creditors. Can you explain a little bit more to our listeners what is the automatic stay and how does that benefit them?
Okay, so everybody knows the concept of a timeout in sports, okay? And that's what the automatic stay is. It's simply a timeout. It's them calling a timeout and saying, we're filing bankruptcy. We are seeking relief from all of our creditors, not just the lawsuit that is pending, but all the creditors. And it's an opportunity to tell the world, and I'm going to explain, let me back up about bankruptcy. So what is a bankruptcy? Because I don't think we really got into it. Yeah. And I try to tell people it's really very simple if you think about what has to be disclosed. In a bankruptcy, you disclose 4 things: everything you own, everything you owe, what you make, your income from all sources, and what do you spend. And that's the basic disclosures that you have to do if you want help through the bankruptcy code. So if you're willing to file a bankruptcy case and you're willing to disclose all those things, in return, you get what's called the automatic stay, which is your way of saying, this is my financial picture. I don't have the money to pay you, and you, and I want some relief, whether it's a Chapter 7 or Chapter 13.
What is the difference between Chapter 7 and Chapter 13? So most Chapter 7s they call them a straight liquidation. So that's where your income is here, your basic living expenses are here, there's really nothing left over, and you're not trying to save a house that's in foreclosure, you're not trying to catch up a certain type of debt like a credit card, not a credit card debt, like IRS taxes. So often people will use bankruptcy to do that, and you're just trying to walk away from your debt. Okay, that's the more common type of bankruptcy that an individual or husband and wife might file. There's also what's called the Chapter 13, which is a reorganization. A lot of people get confused about that, and they go online and they're doing their own research, and they think, oh my God, a Chapter 13 means I'm paying my creditors back. That's not entirely true. So if you were paying $2,000 a month to be current with your creditors, but your income is here and your expenses are here, and there's only $300 left over, okay? And it's not what you said, is we use certain IRS guidelines and means testing, but let's say there's $300 left over. So instead of spending $2,000 a month to be current and not seeing your balances go down month after month, you'd only pay $300
And at the end of the bankruptcy plan, whether it's 3 to 5 years, you're going to be debt-free, completely debt-free.
Yeah. How long does the process take, let's say, for example, in the case of a Chapter 7 and then Chapter 13?
Okay. So first they have to, make the decision to file bankruptcy. So let's say they decide they want to file bankruptcy, they retain me, they get me all the documents, the tax returns, the pay stubs, the proof of income, and so on. We can get a case filed in a matter of days. That's not a problem. So from the date it's filed, you're looking about 4 months' time for a discharge in a Chapter 7. That's the piece of paper that somebody who's filing bankruptcy is looking for. That's the get-out-of-jail-free card. That's where they say, we're done. And then they can start rebuilding credit and so on. That's 4 months, and that's pretty typical, barring any unforeseen matters like a disclosure that wasn't done properly or something like that. But I would say you can pretty much bank on 4 months, and almost everybody who files bankruptcy under Chapter 7 gets a discharge. Chapter 13 is a different thing. So same thing in terms of getting the documents. The case gets filed, and in about 4 or 5 months, sometimes 6 months, they get what's called a confirmed plan. And all a plan is a roadmap on how much they pay each month and how that money is sprinkled out there by the trustee to certain creditors. Unsecured credit cards, for example, and medical loans and personal loans, they're usually getting peanuts. They're getting pennies on the dollar. Most of the money that is paid is typically to like an IRS debt or maybe to catch up a car payment, for example. The case itself can take anywhere from 3 to 5 years for completion. But the benefit of that goes back to the automatic stay. So while you're making those payments to the trustee, at no time can any of these creditors bother you. They can't sue you. They can't try to take your deposition. They can't hound your employer. They can't garnish your wages. They can't do anything to you. So you're on a path to being debt-free, and you could start living your life, whether it's accepting a position at a company, starting another business, maybe even regrouping in your own business if you didn't have any debt against the business.
Okay. Sometimes I get a question that a client is suing, and they want to pursue the litigation, but at the same time they're considering bankruptcy. So even if you're a plaintiff, that you can, you file bankruptcy, everything goes into the bankruptcy, even if you're the plaintiff, correct?
So remember what I said before, you have to disclose everything you own, owe, make, and spend. Well, everything you own includes the jewelry you have, the furniture you have, the house you have, the cabin in the mountains that you might have, the work truck that you have, any equity you have in vehicles. I might ask somebody, and I'll get to your question in a second. Somebody might say, they have 3 cars and 1 car's paid off and they're so happy. And then I ask them, how much is the car worth? Oh, it's $20,000. And they're so happy. I said, you don't understand. You have a $20,000 oil spot in your driveway. That is a $20,000 bill. That doesn't excite me. That's an asset now that you could lose in a Chapter 7, or we have to pay it back over time in a Chapter 13, or if we have the luxury of time, we could do pre-bankruptcy planning and maybe sell that car and move them into other things that where they don't lose the car. A lawsuit is an asset. So people come to me. The more common lawsuit that I might come across is just a personal injury lawsuit, where the personal injury attorney is telling them, it could be worth $50,000 to $100,000, and you're going to get $40,000 in your pocket. Well, that's a $40,000 asset that's not liquidated today, but it is a potential asset that a trustee will wait to see how it goes and use those funds for the benefit of the creditors. It's not a bad thing to have a lawsuit, but they might not benefit personally from winning the lawsuit because the money will go to pay those creditors. And sometimes they don't have a choice, because if they have to file bankruptcy because of a garnishment or a collection matter where they're going after their bank accounts or foreclosure, even though they might have this lawsuit going on here, they don't have the luxury of time. They still have to file bankruptcy and list it as an asset. And that's another reason to do a Chapter 13, because kind of a little trick of the trade, you do a 13, you make your payments based upon your current situation, and if the lawsuit hits and you're able to, get your payday, so to speak, then we might dismiss the 13. So we have that ability to do that.
You mentioned garnishment. What happens if someone is already, their wages being garnished, and then they file bankruptcy? What happens to that garnishment order?
Well, it stops. That's the automatic stay. So, and that's what I always tell people. The beauty of bankruptcy is we get to call a timeout to everything. And so if you're having $400 taken out of your paycheck every 2 weeks, and you just can't afford it, and you need that, well, that's over $800 a month. We could do a bankruptcy, and even if you had to pay $200 a month to the trustee under a Chapter 13 plan, you're still coming out ahead $600, and you're not only getting rid of the debt for that garnishment order, because the garnishment order is related to a judgment, but you're getting rid of all the other debt you may have.
The judgment that is behind the garnishment.
Right. So the judgment and the garnishment may have brought them into my office, but they have all this other debt they're dealing with.
What is the meeting of creditors in relation to bankruptcy?
Okay, so it's the one and only time that debtors in bankruptcy have to, prior to the pandemic, we had to do these things in person. So that's the one time they'd actually go to court, meet with the trustee, and the trustee would ask them questions. Now it's done by either Zoom now it's done by Zoom. They just went to Zoom with video. They schedule about 5 or so of these every half hour. So if you think about it, in between meetings, it's only about 5-6 minutes per person. We've spent a lot more time talking now. So the debtor has already disclosed everything in the bankruptcy petition and schedules. Then about a month after the case is filed, they have this event called a meeting of creditors that they must attend and talk about their situation under oath with the trustee, who's going to ask them some kind of follow-up questions to what's in the paperwork. Okay, nothing that they need to practice for, nothing that they need to study or have backup documents with. Everything's up here. So when somebody goes, they're just answering the questions. Most of them are simple yes/no questions. It is under oath. It's called a meeting of creditors because it's also the opportunity that creditors have to join in this discussion and ask questions. And I would say less than 1 or 2% of the time do creditors ever appear. It's for the most part a conversation or interview with the trustee and the person filing bankruptcy.
Are there certain debts that are not dischargeable? I heard that student loans are not dischargeable.
That's true. So for many, many years, student loans have not been dischargeable. There is some movement in Congress and in Washington, D.C. to kind of soften that restriction. There's 2 basic types of student loans. There's government-backed student loans and private student loans. Some of the government-backed student loans are getting a little bit easier to discharge, but they require what's called an adversary proceeding, and that is, it's a lawsuit within a bankruptcy. Very few of them succeed. I always tell people your best option if you have student loans is to apply for what's called an income-based repayment plan, because somebody who's coming to me, and if they're eligible for an income-based or income-sensitive repayment plan, they can do one of those, and then they renew every year based upon their income at that time. So people can apply and pay sometimes nothing so their payment is zero. And if they can make 12 payments of zero, then next year they renew their application, and depending upon what their income, maybe their payment is $50, or maybe it stays at zero. And if they could do that for a certain amount of time, they can be discharged of certain student loans.
Well, that's very important to know. What is the relationship? Well, let me talk about. I'm going to ask this question first. If somebody owes taxes, and how does bankruptcy can assist with addressing any type of prior taxes that they owe?
So there's many different types of taxes. There's 1040 taxes, which are the personal income taxes that you might pay. There's 941 taxes. That's if you're a business owner and you weren't doing the proper taxes to the IRS for your business and for your employees. So certain taxes are dischargeable after certain thresholds. I try to tell people, if you're filing your tax returns on time each year, and let's say it's due in April but you can do an extension to October. But let's say you're filing them on time each year. After 3 years, the taxes that you owe for 1040 taxes are typically going to be dischargeable, barring fraud or something like that. 941 taxes, those are kind of like trust type taxes where you were entrusted to receive money and take money from the paychecks and then forward them to the IRS. Those taxes you're not going to be able to walk away from.
So it is not a good idea for a business owner not to pay those payroll taxes. It's
never a good idea for a business owner to do things improperly. And I try to tell people, if you can't do, because I've spoken with so many business owners over the years, and I try to tell people all the time, if you can't afford to pay the taxes properly, if you can't afford to pay yourself a decent income for the time you're spending in this business, then this business is not succeeding, and you should really consider either fixing it or walking away from it. But you can't continue doing it, because remember, if this burden is growing and growing and growing, and 5-10 years from now, they leave the business, they didn't really leave the business because this debt's going to hang with them for years to come.
Yes, that's a good point. One thing that when business owners, and it's a little bit aside from topic, they say, I want to have 1099 employees. And I'm like, there's no such thing as a 1099 employee. They are the employees or independent contractors. And many business owners use the independent contractor to bypass or try to circumvent the idea of paying payroll taxes. It's just a terrible idea.
It is a terrible idea. It's not directly related to bankruptcy, but it goes back to what I was saying before. If you're a business owner and you're relying on employees, but you're trying to find a less expensive way to compensate them, that could come back to bite you in all sorts of ways, not just in bankruptcy, but in workers' comp issues and so many different things down the road.
Yeah, wage and hour lawsuits.
What's that?
Wage and hour lawsuits.
And wage and hour lawsuits. They know the answer. And sometimes it's the employee that actually says, I'd like you to pay me as a 1099 because they want more money in their pocket. So it's not always the business owner that is asking for this.
I tell them, the business owners, just get a payroll company. I mean, if you're going to pay payroll, for number one, if they're employees, pay them a salary.
Right.
Number two, if you're going to pay payroll, get a payroll company. They're so affordable for what they charge and what they do. I mean, we're talking about $50 a payroll, something like that. I mean, It's so affordable considering all the reports that they do, considering that they do the math. They basically pay those payroll taxes directly to the IRS, to the state of Florida. You have just such a peace of mind for the minimum cost you got to pay. It's just worth it.
It's a no-brainer. They're doing all the quarterlies. They're doing the annual paperwork. They're doing the W-2s and the 1099s and so on.
That's a great point. Do you also help clients that are in a situation that they might be facing foreclosure?
That's a big part of my practice. I got into that 25 years ago. When I recognize that, listen, it's the American dream to own a home. I mean, let's face it, we've been indoctrinated that you must own a home, and it's a great way to save for retirement. I'm not saying people should all be renters, but if you're going to own a home, you really need to be able to afford it. But a lot of people end up getting into home ownership and they can't afford it because they don't have a reliable income. They might bounce between jobs, their business revenue fluctuates, and it's very difficult. So invariably, I end up representing people who are in foreclosure. And sometimes, people think foreclosure only happens with mortgages. In South Florida, we're loaded with homeowners associations and condo associations, and that's a big part of the foreclosure world. So again, what we do, if they're about to lose their home, again, just like before, I prefer to meet with them and help them before there's a judgment and a foreclosure sale date. But either which way, we use Chapter 13 typically, again, call a timeout to the foreclosure, and we're using their income and expenses to hopefully catch up the mortgage, catch up the homeowners association, make payments to a trustee, and give them a chance to save their home. And it's been great for a lot of people because they might come to me and the house is worth about what is owed on the mortgage, okay? So they might have a $500,000 house and the balance might be about 500. And so they're struggling, but they still need a roof over their head. We do a bankruptcy, and 3 to 5 years later, they've saved their house, and the house is now worth $750 with a $500,000 mortgage. So, and I try to tell people, South Florida is a very difficult market to live in and own a home, and people are coming from all over the country, coming to Florida. And if you want to stay in Florida and you are fortunate enough to own a home, I tell them fight like hell, fight like crazy to save this house. And we can do that, and I've helped people stay in their homes for years and years. They don't get a free house. There's no free houses. So contrary to what you may read or hear about, there's no free houses. You do have to pay for it, but sometimes the house you have is the best house you're able to afford.
Yeah, that's a great point. Also, if they lose the house, it's going to be extremely difficult and not impossible to get another one.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world. It's truly not the end of the world. And I look at it holistically. I try to tell people, I said, let's look at how old you are right now. Let's look at, what your income's going to be. I mean, if somebody knows that, and the payment's $3,000 a month, and I'm not going to take too long on this. If the payment's $3,000 a month for principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, and they're nearing retirement, and their anticipated Social Security is only going to be like $2,200 a month, I tell them, I said, listen, this particular house is not in your permanent future. Eventually, you will not be able to afford this house. So if you understand and accept that, maybe now's a good time to figure out a different plan. Because why struggle for 10 more years with this house that you will ultimately lose when maybe you should find a less expensive condo in a 55 and older community, for example.
That's a great point. Jeff, how do people find you?
So, they can go to my website, www.debthappens.com, DEBTHAPPENS.com. That's kind of my philosophy. It's not the end of the world. It just, life happens, and we know. Or they can call my office at 954-535-9905.
Jeff, this was great information. I'm sure our listeners are going to appreciate all the information you provided to us. I'm going to repeat Jeff's website is Jeff Tromberg. The website is debthappens.com. The number is 954-535-9905. This also is going to be our show notes in our show notes in the podcast, and also it's going to be in our YouTube channel as well, the website and the phone number. Thanks for coming today. I'm very excited that you joined me.
This was a lot of fun, Rich. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And just for listeners, just a quick first of all, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. It's be the Thanksgiving episode. Happy Thanksgiving, Jeff.
Thank you.
And anybody wants to reach me, my email is rich@sierra.com. And my phone number is 866-842-5202. Remember, the podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you see your shows. Listen to your shows. If you like the show, give us a review, follow us. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Remember, until next week, this is Rich Sierra. My goal is to help you succeed.